In our last video, we learned about while loops and how they help us repeat actions. But Python has another type of loop that makes things even easier, and which is the for loop. So let's dive in and see how that works. Unlike the while loops, which runs until a condition becomes false, for loops are used when we already know how many times we want to repeat something. So let's see a simple example where we want to print numbers from 1 to 5 using for loop. So for that, we have to write the for keyword. Then we're gonna have a variable, for example num. You can name this anything, and then you have to write another keyword because we will be working with range and the keyword is in. Then you can write range, and what range we want from 1 to 5. So we have to write 1, 6, because if you write here 5, it will take values from 1 to 4. So make sure to write here 6 if you want a value to 5. After that, you have to write the colon. Then you can write the for block, and there you can write the print statement and just print num. So in while loops, we had to manually increment num, but in the for loops, it will be handled by Python. So if you run the code, you will see it prints 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the key point here is range 1, 6 generates numbers from 1 to 5 because not including 6, and num takes each value from the range one at a time. So first num holds the value 1 and it goes inside the for loop and prints 1. Then again it goes there and it becomes 2 and prints num again, and this process goes on until num becomes 5. By the way, range is super useful while working with for loops. You can write it like this. For example, for I in range 5, and if you print I and run the code, you will see prints 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it starts from 0 by default and goes all the way to 5 minus 1 means 4. So in range, if we only provide one number, it starts from 0 and goes up to 1 less than the number. And in range, what we can do is we can use steps as well. So we're gonna tell Python that start from 1, then print until it becomes 9, and we want step or gap of 2. So now if I run the code, let me make the terminal a little bit bigger. You will see it prints 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9. So the third number, which is 2, tells Python to skip numbers in steps of 2. As you can see, it prints 1, then it goes ahead of 2 step and prints 3. Again it goes ahead of 2 step and prints 5. If you write here 3 and run the code, you'll see it prints 1, then it goes ahead of 3 step and prints 4, and again it goes ahead of 3 step and prints 7. For loops don't just work with numbers, we can use them with loop through lists, strings and more. For example, we have a variable called fruits, and there we have some values like apple, then banana, and then cherry. Now instead of writing print statement and then passing fruits and 0 in square brackets to print apple, then again write the print statement and fruits and in square brackets giving 1. So if the list is a little bit long, then it would take forever to print all the elements. So instead of doing that, what we can do is we can write the for loop. So for fruit, you can name this anything in fruits, but this has to match this one. Then you can give the colon sign and print fruit. So now if you run the code, you will see it prints apple, banana, then cherry. So in the first iteration, it goes to this list and assigns apple to this variable fruit and prints apple in this line. After that, it again goes to the for loop, and here the for loop goes inside the list, and after apple, it puts banana into the fruit variable, then comes to the for block and prints banana. And again, the for loops goes inside the list, and after banana, it puts cherry inside this variable, and then in the third line it prints cherry. Make sure to match these two variable names, but you can name this anything. For example, you can name this I, but if you make that I, make sure use I here, and if you run the code, you will see the expected output again. So the key points here, the loop picks each item from the fruits list and prints it. This makes working with lists super easy. Now let's see how we can work with strings with the for loop. So let me remove this code, and we can write the for keyword, then define a variable. You can name this anything. I'm gonna name this letter. So for letter in, then the in keyword, then just give a string, for example Python. So for every letter in Python, print the letter. So if you run the code, you'll see it prints P, then Y, then T, H, O, N. So what it does is, the for loop first assigns P inside letter, then it goes to the second line and prints P, and again the for loop assigns Y inside the letter variable and prints Y. After that, the for loop assigns T in the letter variable, and then it prints T, and the process goes on until N. Let me remove this code, and just like while loops, we can use break and continue statement in for loops too. So break and continue statement. For example, we have a for loop. So for num in range 1, 10 means 1 to 9, we want to print num. If I run the code, you will see it prints 1 to 9. But what if you want that if num becomes 5, then it should not proceed and exit the loop? In that case, you can use the break statement. So what you can do is, you can write if num equal 5, and if that is true, then just break the loop. So now if you run the code, you will see it prints 1, 2, 3, and 4. So here when num is 1, it goes to the for block. Then in this condition, it finds that 1 is not equal 5, so it does not break and go to the outer part of if block and prints 1. Then again it goes to the loop, and now num is 2. So this condition is false. Again it prints 2. And again it goes to the for loop. Now num is 3, and this condition is false, so it does not breaks. Instead of that, it prints 3. After that, it again goes to the loop. Now num is 4. This condition is false again, so it does not breaks. That means Python skips this part and runs print 4. And again it goes to the loop. Now num is 5, so this statement is true. So this if block code gets executed and it founds a break, so it stops the entire loop. So as here we stop the entire loop, it does not go further, so it does not print 5. So we see the output 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's take the example of the continue statement. So let's not take too much range, so I'm gonna take the range from 1 to 5, and here if num becomes 3, then we want to continue. So what continue does is, it does not stop the entire loop, but it stops one iteration of the loop. So initially num will have the value 1, so it will print 1, because when num is 1, it will go inside this for block, and there it will found this condition, and 1 is not equal 3, so it will not go inside the if block and will print 1. Then it will go to the loop again. Now num is 2, so 2 is not equal to 3, so Python will skip this part and print 2. Then again it will go to the for loop. Now num is 3, so this condition is true, so it will continue. This means for only this time, do not print below code, means do not print num, which holds the value 3, and go to the for loop again. As you can see, Python did not print at 3. Now in the for loop, num is 4, which is not equal to 3, so this part is skipped and Python prints 4. And again it goes to the logic. Now num is 5, so num not equal 3, so Python skips this part and prints 5. So that's how continue statement works in for loop. Now let's see some example of nested loops. So if there is a loop inside another loop, then that is called a nested loop. For example, we have a loop for I in range 1, 4 means 1 to 3. Then inside this for loop, we're gonna have another for loop, and there we're gonna tell for j in range 1, 4 means we want the values from 1 to 3, and inside that for loop we want to print, and here we are gonna use the string formatting. So I'm gonna write the F key, then I'm gonna give the quotations, and here in curly braces I'm gonna give I, then comma, then j. Okay, and for the outer for loop I'm gonna print nothing. I'll just write the print statement so it moves to the next line. So now if I run the code, you will see some pair of values. As you can see, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, then 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, and so on. Let me write here comma, then and equal empty string. And now if I run the code, you will see it prints in a nicer manner. And let's use some parentheses here. Now if I run the code, you can see this looks nice. Okay, so here what is happening is, in this for loop, which is the parent for loop, I becomes 1 in the initial render. So it goes inside this block, and here j is also 1. So what it does is it prints the value of I, which was 1, as you can see 1, and it prints the value of j, which is 1 here, and it prints 1, 1. Okay, after it prints that, it goes to this loop again, not in the parent loop but inside the nested loop till I is 1. But in the second iteration, j becomes 2, so it prints 1, 2. Okay, so after printing 1, 2, it goes to the nested loop again, not in the parent loop, in the nested loop. And here I is still 1, but j now becomes 3, so it prints 1, 3. Understanding? After it finished the range 1 to 3, as you can see we have the range of 1 to 3. So after it finished the range for j, now it goes to the outer for loop print statement, and there it founds, we are telling that move next part to a new line. So as you can see, these values are pushed to a new line, and after printing a new line, it goes to the outer for loop. Now I becomes 2. After that, it again goes inside the nested loop. Now j again becomes 1, so I is 2 and j is reinitialized to 1, so it prints 2, 1. Understanding? After that, after printing 2, 1, it goes to the nested loop again. Still I is equal to 2, so I is equal to 2, and inside the nested second iteration, now j is also 2, so it is printing 2, 2. After printing 2, 2, it again goes to the nested loop. I is still 2, but now j becomes 3, so it prints 2, 3. As you can see, it prints 2, 3. Then as we finished our range, it ends the nested loop and go to the parent loop, and there we tell Python to move to a next line. So as you can see, other values are pushed to next line. So after that, it goes to the parent loop again. Now I becomes 3, so I becomes 3, and after that it goes inside the nested loop, and again j gets reinitialized to 1, so it prints 3, which is the value of I, and 1, which is the value of j. After printing 3, 1, it goes to the nested loop again. In the second nested iteration, j becomes 2, so it prints 3, 2. Then again it goes to the for loop, and I is still 3 and j also becomes 3, so it prints 3, 3. As you can see, 3, 3. Then we completed our range, so it goes to the parent loop or the outer loop, and founds, we told him to move further content to our next line, so it prints a new line. Then it goes to the for loop and finds that we do not have further range, so it exits the loop. So the work is done here. So I hope you understood the for loops and the use cases of it. So before we wrap up, let me tell about some common mistakes in for loop. So the first one is if you do not use proper indentation. make sure to use proper indentation to make Python understand this part of code belongs to which block. As this part of code belongs to this block, so this should have a tab space before itself. Another thing to keep in mind that if you write here 4, it will take range 1, 2, 3. Let's make this comment. So if you want to take range up to 4, you have to write here 5. So I hope you understood the common mistakes of for loops and how to use for loops and the use cases of it. So that's all for now. See you in the next one.